Good evening and welcome once again to Have a Seat with Chris Hansen. I'm Chris Hansen. Thank you for joining me. I hope you all are well, safe, at home if possible. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And we have tonight our continuing investigation into Dahvie Vanity, who is the head of a group called Blood on the Dance Floor, and allegations of predator-like activity involving dozens of young women. We have a victim tonight who was actually held hostage by Dahvie for 2 months, and another artist who worked with him who has some really keen insight into this man's psyche. We'll get into that in a minute, but first I just want to take a moment to talk about our other investigation into the YouTube psycho brat in Washington State, known as Onision. There's a lot of noise this week about an interview that was supposed to happen between me and Greg James, or a debate of some sort. Well, let me just put it into perspective for you. I originally asked him for an interview about 6 months ago. He demanded $350,000. Then I went to Washington State, knocked on his door, and asked him for an interview. He didn't come to the door and say, "Chris, it's a bad time. Chris, I'm making lunch for the kids. Chris, let's talk about it tomorrow. Set up a neutral location and we'll do the interview." No, what he did was call 911. The tape is right here on this channel, and you can listen to that later. The sheriff's department came. I had a nice chat with them. They were surprised I hadn't been there earlier, given the circumstances and everything that's been happening at that house. So fast forward 4 or 5 months, and all of a sudden he's in this manic phase of demanding an interview, and it's got to be done like in the last 5 days. So he puts this out there. He wants to have me on a stream. I'm not going to do that live. If he wants to do an interview, I would really like to put some hard questions to him. And these allegations about grooming, sexual assault, human trafficking, child pornography, re-victimizing the victims. These are all very serious allegations that he faces. So I am back and forth with him through Mike Morris, a lawyer who's affiliated with the show. And it goes from a live interview, we're not going to do that, to a taped interview. And he says he would do it, but he's going to stream it live anyway. So this falls apart. He didn't want to really do an interview. He was trying to create an event, which is what he does. He lives in his own parallel universe. He's a narcissist, a predator. So then when it doesn't happen, he goes live with a bunch of other streamers, making it look like somehow I backed out or chickened out. Here's the reality of the situation. When I went to knock on his door, he hid in the lower level of that house. He called 911. He didn't come to the door. He didn't address it. He didn't want to go face to face with a real reporter who would ask real questions. Now, why this manic move to do the interview now? Well, here's what I think. He's right there in Seattle, Tacoma, the ground zero in this country for COVID-19. Nobody's traveling right now. Nobody can get on a plane and do a face-to-face interview. So he knows that if he can make it look like he offered an interview to me and I didn't do it because it couldn't be face-to-face, which is the reality of it, or I couldn't do it and record it remotely without him live streaming it and making an absolute mockery of the whole thing, he knew I wouldn't do it. So then he can jump around to these different sites with different people who apparently, for whatever reason, support him in spite of everything, in spite of the evidence against him, in spite of the FBI investigation, and in spite of the sheriff's investigation. So there you have it. That's why there was no interview this week. If he ever wants to do a real interview, answer real questions from a real reporter, I'm anxious to do it, happy to do it. But until then, it's not happening. We'll have more next week in our investigation of the YouTube psycho brat in Washington State. But right now, I want to introduce you to the 2 young women who are going to be my guests tonight. We have Caine, who was with Dahvie Vanity for a period of months, about 10 years ago, and her story is absolutely harrowing. We also have Nicole Nogrady, who is an artist, musician in her own right, an actor, and she spent some time collaborating with Dahvie Vanity as well. Welcome, Katie, to the show. Welcome, Nicole, to the show. I appreciate you guys being here very much. How are you tonight? Safe, healthy, I hope?
Yes, doing very well.
Excellent. Katie, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
How did you first meet Dahvie Vanity Jesus Torres?
Well, when I first met him, it was at one of his like concerts. I had gone with a couple of my friends, and we went out to go see him. And he ended up like meeting up after the concert, like because he kind of just hung out after he would perform, and he would do like meet and greets, like walk around, talk to people. So after he had finished performing, he came over and talked to myself and my friends, and that was sort of like my first like encounter meeting with him. And he just kind of came towards me, gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek, and then he exchanged his phone number with me.
And how old were you at the time, Kitty?
I was 16 when I first 16. Met him. Mm-hmm.
Were you impressed by his celebrity?
Yes. Yes. I kind of like looked up to him. Like he was one of those people, like I was really starstruck by, you know, everything about him, like caught and pulled up in his, like, he had a gravitational pull at that point. Like everyone just kind of wanted to be around him, be like him, like idolized him.
So the concert happens. Did you see him much after the show? Did you keep in contact with him? How did it go from there?
So after we had exchanged numbers and such, we kind of started like texting and talking. And at first, like he kind of just like, you know, like sweet talked me, I guess you would say. Like he would tell me, oh, you're so pretty. Oh, you're so nice. Like things like of that nature. And then as time kind of went on, things sort of started to progress like from there.
Looking back with perspective, was he grooming you?
I think so, yes. I believe he was.
And how did you finally come to start actually hanging out with him?
So he waited until like he had talked to me and kept in contact with me, like he was texting and talking, and then he kind of like dropped off for like a short period of time. I'm not sure like what he was doing at that point. And then he kind of circled back around once I turned 18, and then he kind of like put himself back into the picture.
When was the first time you actually went to go see him?
I went to go see him in December. December was when I flew out. It was 2010, December of 2010.
And he flew you to him?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yes.
And this was in Florida?
Yes.
And what did you think was going to happen on that trip?
Well, he had told me that he just like wanted to like hang out. We talked and planned on going to like Disney. He had talked about like he was really like big into like the Disney theme parks and stuff. He had talked about like going there, hanging out, like meeting up with some of his friends, like that sort of thing, like was what it initially was.
Was it to be a romantic sort of thing, or was it sort of, well, I'm going to go and see what happens. This guy's famous. I like his music.
It was more of like, yeah, it was definitely, I was caught in like the starstruck feeling, I guess you'd say. Like I wanted to be a part of like what he was doing because he seemed really cool to me at the time. So I wanted to be a part of that. I mean, I was young, I was naive. I wanted to be, you know, in and around the music industry.
Now, Nicole, you were in this orbit around the same time. How did you first get to know Dahvie Vanity Jesus Torres?
I had met a friend of a friend who was a music producer, and he had invited me totally casually just up to hang out at the studio, which is pretty normal. And so I had up there, and he was expecting this band who was coming from Florida, who he was supposed to be doing a co-write with. So really, I was just hanging out in the studio, and when they arrived, Katie was with them. So that's how she and I first met each other. So I met her along with the band, and I didn't really know what their affiliation was. I kind of assumed that maybe they were dating, maybe it was a girlfriend, but I wasn't sure. And we actually did get together multiple days in a row at that recording studio, because what had happened was we're all hanging out at the studio, and the music and people just kind of start throwing out lyrics and different ideas. And overall, it was really good at that time, because I didn't know then what I know now about him. But yeah, when we first met, it was all just kind of a fun vibe, just like what Katie is describing as well.
Were you worried about Katie when you saw her hanging out there? Did something seem odd to you, or did it all
I
seem
thought she was
okay?
I thought she was young. I thought she was young, but I knew that she was over 18. So, I was definitely kind of taking her on a wing a little bit, and I didn't think there was a problem. I just thought, okay, she's young and she's kind of starstruck over these guys. And no, I didn't think much about it, because at the time, like I said, they're just guys that came into a recording studio. They know who I was and that I actually have musical background, and it just kind of really manifested. And all of us actually got on a track together. Remember that, Katie?
Yeah.
Remember we all went in the booth together, and so at the time it was like fun vibes all around. So nothing bad at that point.
Katie, let me go to you for a minute. When did it go for you from hanging out with Dahvie and the band to, oh my God, what did I get myself into?
Everything kind of went 0 to 100 the night that that X times 3 video was created. When he made that video, that was the worst night of my life.
So for those who don't know what the X times 3 video is, let's back up and start the evening. You're with Dahvie. He gives you some drinks.
Correct.
And tell me what happens after you have the drinks.
So honestly, he went over, he said, he's like, I'm going to make you a drink. Like, he was all excited, and, being how he was, he poured me like a really tall glass, with tequila, I believe was what he put in there. I didn't really see because his back. Yeah. So sorry. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I know it's nervous to relive something like this. You've really never talked about this publicly before, and I appreciate you sharing your story, and we'll get into that more in a minute as to why this is so important. But he made you a drink, and it was different than any other drink you had before up until that point. Is that fair?
Correct. Yes.
So you have the drink.
Right. I had the drink, and everything was fine, like at first. And then things kind of started to take a I'm sorry.
It's okay. Take your time. We've got nothing but time here to get your story. It sounds like, looking back, that maybe there was something in that drink besides alcohol. Is that right?
That's what I felt, but I couldn't prove anything like that. But that was what it felt like to me. I'd been, when you, sorry.
No, take your time. Take your time. I know it's going back this many years, and this is about 10 years ago. I know it's tough to do. And I know it took a lot of courage to come out tonight. And what you need to always remember is that this is not your fault. You were a young, vulnerable woman who found herself in a tough situation. And as Nicole just said, you're helping a lot of people. So he pours you the drink. It slams you. Is that pretty fair to say?
Yeah.
I mean, it like no other drink you've ever had.
Yeah, it just kind of like hit me like a sack of bricks. It was like 1 minute I was fine, and then the next minute it's like there was like time gaps, like where I remember things and then I don't remember things, and then it was just kind of like back and forth between like remembering and not remembering. And then he at one point I remember he took me into a closet, and that was where everything took place, was inside his walk-in closet.
Had you blacked out at that point? Were you in control of yourself? Was it just a blurry feeling?
Blurry and kind of limp, I guess you'd say. Like I felt like my body was jello. That's the best way I can describe it. Like I just felt kind of like really just like limp. And he sat on top of me, and you know, he put his hands around my neck and like held me down.
This is in the closet in his apartment.
Correct, yeah.
After he gave you this drink that apparently was spiked with something.
Correct. And then he was just like choking me, and I couldn't breathe. I remember crying, and I remember like I could feel like the tears like coming down my cheeks, and you know, feeling like I couldn't breathe. But it was like also being caught like a deer in the headlights, you know, where you're frozen. It's like it's happening, but like for that moment, it's like you can't move.
And what did he say to you as this was going on?
I could have swore I thought I heard him say like, and I know this is really messed up, but I could have swore that I heard him say like, I'm gonna kill you. I don't know what he meant in that context, but it was really scary.
That would be Dahvie.
I don't know if, you know,
what did he do then?
After that, he ended up, like, I remember him undoing my shorts, and, yeah, then, after that, it's kind of, it's hard to talk about.
Okay. He assaulted you.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And then I woke up the next day, and I was on the couch in the living room, and just kind of, you know, waking up and dealing with what had happened.
You were trying to sort out the night before.
Correct. Yeah.
Did you know at that point that before he took you into the closet, he had actually made a video of you?
When he was making the video, it was kind of like blurry, I guess you'd say, because he was always kind of like filming his shenanigans, I guess you'd say. Like he was always kind of
had a camera
doing that. He always had a camera going. Like he was always really like invested in what he was doing. He always wanted everyone to know like what his amazing rock star life was like, and you know, everything that he was doing there. So I didn't really, you know, think anything of it at first, and then, you know, once the alcohol started hitting me further down the line and everything else, you know, it just kind of, everything just kind of blurred.
Did you have feelings for him at the time?
I would say that like I had some like feelings. Obviously there was some feeling and connection like there, but it was more of like, I feel like it was more of like I looked up to him. Like I thought he was so cool. Like I guess, if that makes sense, like I wanted to be like,
you wanted to be part of the group, part of the band, as opposed to his girlfriend.
And he liked to promise things to a lot of people. Oh, I'm going to put you in my video, and oh, I'm going to this and that. And so he kind of made everyone feel as if they were going to be a part of it or they were a part of it, but that was part of his manipulation.
Nicole, why did he appeal to people? Why did you, as an artist, as a lyricist, a musician, an actress, why did you want to be a part of this? Was it just a break for you? Did he have some sort of charisma?
He definitely had charisma, absolutely had charisma. And it was one of those things that it just happened. Like I said, I was sitting in the recording studio up in Burbank. These guys come walking in. They're unlike anyone I'd ever seen, even in Hollywood, which is pretty surprising, you know, covered head to toe in tattoos. And he just had a lot of enthusiasm, and it seemed like he was really there for the music. And at that point, I had never heard any of their music from the past. I never heard, you know, Sexting is one of the names of his songs. And after the fact, after I had already started working with him, I went back and listened to the songs and was a little bit like, oh no, what did I get myself into? But to answer your question, I was there just now, and I was just hanging out with Katie on the couch, and Dahvie didn't know who I was, but I just started spitting out rhymes and ideas and, you know, getting just into the creative flow. And before I knew it, it was like, hey, come into the booth and say this line. And then it's like, okay, well, now let's sit down and talk about the legalities. Okay, I might be on your record now. So it was those things that it just kind of just happened.
So if we had a split screen camera at the time, when he was in the process of abusing Katie, he was in the process of getting ready to abuse you in a whole different way. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say abuse. Well,
take advantage of?
I guess I would.
Exploit?
Take advantage of and use people for his own advantage without any consideration for them, or, you know, really upholding promises on his end and treating other artists and other people in the industry who, I can tell you, anyone that sees this video that's worked with Dahvie Vanity would 100% agree with me and have their own story, whether it's him showing up 4 or 5 or 6 hours late for a photo shoot, not showing up at all and not returning phone calls, you know, not returning borrowed clothing, like all the horror stories that you hear in Hollywood about people just having poor business ethics, not signing contracts, just acting really, really unprofessionally. It would 100% be Dahvie. He had no idea how to really operate himself in a legitimate business manner, but he liked to pretend and act like he did.
Katie, when did you learn that he had made this video of you, this X×3?
It was after the fact. It was after I'd gotten back home, after I'd arrived home. That was kind of when the video and everything sort of like came out. It was when I was no longer there with him. After
the incident in the closet where he made you the drink and we think there was something in the drink besides alcohol, how much longer did you stay with him and what was that like for you?
I had to stay with him. It was around like a month and a half, like 2 months. My memory is a little bit like spotty of like, I can't remember if it was exactly a month and a half or 2 months, but about, you know, a decent amount of time.
Did you feel that he was keeping you there against your will? Were you a hostage? Is that language accurate or too strong, or how would you describe it?
I say that it was more of like, he was the one who paid for my flight, like paid for my plane ticket, to bring me out there. So it was like I was almost like indebted to him. Like I had to almost like go along with what he was doing, even though in that time, like I had been hurt and things had happened. I had to almost like suck up to him, I guess you'd say, and like do whatever he wanted. Because otherwise, you know, I felt like I wasn't going to be able to get back home if I didn't obey.
Did you tell him, look, it's time for me to go, I got to get out of here?
Honestly, sorry, this is...
It's all right. Take your time.
Sorry.
It's okay. Take your
Just
time.
hey, take a couple deep breaths.
I ended up like leaving because my mom, she ended up calling because she had wondered where I was, what I was doing, because I didn't say anything when I left. And so she was kind of worried, like I'd been, gone for an amount of time. And she called to check on me, and he answered the phone. Like he picked up the phone when she had called, and he spoke to her. And it was just kind of weird, like looking back, like for him to have answered and, picked up my phone and spoke to my mom. And she didn't talk to me until, sorry, I'm sorry.
It's all right. So she calls because she's
Yeah.
worried, about her daughter, where you're at,
Right.
and he actually picks up the phone and speaks to her.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what does he say to your mom?
He told her that I was fine, that everything was okay. He's like, "Oh, she's doing great. Oh, she's fine." And my mom was like, "Put my daughter on the phone. I don't want to hear that from you. I need to hear it from her."
And
But
what did you tell your mom when you got on the phone?
honestly, I told her that I was fine, but it was more because like he was standing right there. It was like he was always like right there. So it was hard to how do I word it? It was hard to
Be honest.
yeah, it was hard to tell the truth and be honest about what was happening when, he's standing right there.
How did that phone call end?
My mom ended up telling him, she said that if he didn't send me back home, that she would contact the authorities. So he did ended up like rapidly sending me home quickly after that.
When he hung up the phone, when you hung up the phone with your mother, what did he say to you?
He didn't really say anything, but he seemed really like irritated and like angry. Like it was almost like an inconvenience for him was the best way I could describe it. Like I was inconveniencing him. And that was sort of how he treated me until I ended up returning home.
How soon after that phone call did you fly back home to Ohio?
After the phone call happened, I ended up going home like a week later, I think. I want to say it was like a week later.
And how did you get to the airport?
Where? From
Dahvie's apartment. Did he take you to the airport?
Yeah, he did.
And how was that?
That was another situation.
What happened when he took you to the airport?
When he took me to the airport, he basically forced my head into his lap. And he tried to make me do yeah, I think
a sexual act.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Katie. I can't imagine how hard this is to go through this. I mean, you go through all this with him and you finally think, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to go home. And then he pulls this in the car on the way to the airport.
Yeah. Yep.
I think he gets off on knowing how much he can get away with people. So he just pushes and pushes and pushes.
And this, I mean, we've talked to other survivors of Dahvie Vanity. There seems to be a pattern here of similar acts. And this fits right in, Katie, with what he's done to other young women.
Yeah, he's not a good person. Bad person.
You get home and this video is released on the internet.
Correct, yeah.
What does the video show and how do you see it?
So the video was things that led up to the closet experience. It was the events that were leading up to what happened to me in the closet. It was literally like everything happening right before the
incident.
The incident, yeah, correct.
I know you probably don't want to describe the video, but it might paint a little bit of a picture of sort of what, I mean, you know, young girl, very intoxicated, possibly roofied, on the floor, you know, rolling around, you know, having sexual conversations, you know, like thing that I think you should be embarrassed of, but the fact that that was on video and broadcast to the world.
Well, again, and I just can't be clear enough about this, that, you know, it's a horrible thing that you went through. You're not to blame here, Katie. And that's the point here. You're doing this to prevent this from happening to other young women, which is the takeaway here. Nicole, you saw this video, right?
I did, and it really pissed me off because I was like, what are you doing? You know, here's this girl who, so my interactions with Katie were, she was with the boys when they flew out to California. I met them all at one time in a recording studio, and Dahvie acted like he was discovering new talent and was saying that he wanted me to Florida. And so Katie and I only connected that one time in LA, and then she went back home. And then when I went to Florida, I see her, but seeing the apartment she was just at long after she had been there, when so it was kind of, we were all in alignment. And yeah, that video just really made me, and when I brought it up to Dahvie and was like, why? See, Dahvie, he saw me as a money opportunity. He never tried anything sexual with me. Mm-hmm. First, we were the same age. And the minute his personality started changing towards me, anytime he gave me any attitude, I had no qualms with giving it back because I've worked in LA for a long time. I've been on that type of personality. So I was able to stick up for myself, and he oftentimes back off me. So our dynamic was very different than, say, their dynamic. And I expressed to him how distasteful it was to put something like that online. But on the flip side, I had a working relationship with him now, just like Katie was saying earlier about how people kind of just would, I don't want to say cower, but, you know, just kind of let slide him. He, what did you say earlier about him, Katie? That he, he was manipulative. He was manipulative.
He was pulling the strings. He knew how to get and get under their skin and influence them.
Yeah. So
and he knew how to exploit young women's vulnerabilities. Now, you being the same age could call him out. What did he say when you called him out on this video, Nicole?
He told, you know, oh, whatever, and it's fine, and I'll take it down. And I'm like, well, you better take it down. You better take it down soon. And that's when she and I started making calls to each other. She reached out to me because I think, Katie, you felt safe with me because that night we met, you know, it was like older sister sort of situation. Yeah. And so when all this kind of stuff started going down, she and I would talk a lot. And of course, then things between he and I would also irritate me business-wise. So then it was like I was calling her to vent to her, him as well. So we kind of had our own little connection going on through all of this.
Katie, when you got back home and you saw this video after he did what he did to you, did you try to report this? Did you try to call him out on it? Did you go to police? Did you tell your parents? What happened?
I just sort of was at the mercy, I would say, of the internet. After that video was released, I had a lot of negative things happen. People were slut shaming me. You know, people were saying I was a whore, I was a slut, you know, everything. under the sun. You know, people had a lot to say, and it wasn't, you know, the internet was a different place back in 2010 compared to, you know, where it is now. It's changed so much.
What did he take away from you?
I would say he took a lot. I would say I felt, I'm trying to think of how to word this. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Take your time.
I would say that, you know, he just caused a lot of hurt, honestly, and just a lot of pain in my life, a lot of unnecessary suffering, things, feelings, and emotions that, you know, I never anticipated feeling. And then yet there I was, you know, being
unfairly targeted.
Yeah, being in that
so not only were you victimized by him, you were exploited in this video, and then you were victimized again online.
Yeah, it was sort of, you know, it was just one thing after the next. And I mean, people were ruthless back then. I mean, they were just saying the worst things. I mean, sending the video to like my teachers, sending it to, you know, friends, family, people. It's just it was everywhere. It was like I couldn't escape it, and it was like being stuck in that moment. I guess the best way I can describe it is like having the worst moment of your life, like one of the worst moments. They're like being
Broadcast.
filmed and being broadcast for the whole world
to millions
see.
and millions of people to see.
Right. And you know, people are looking at it and judging it, and you know, everything.
They don't know that he basically drugged you. So they're just looking at you and judging you from what they see. So
how hard was it to tell your mom about what happened, Katie?
It was really hard. It was really difficult.
What did she say?
When I told her,
Yeah.
you know, she said that it's not my fault.
Well, that's true. Very true.
And she just, I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. It's this tough territory. When you look at this now, 10, 11 years later, what do you say to other young women now around the age that you were when this happened, 16 years old, who are in communication with Dahvie Vanity, who now goes by Dark Arts, Jesus Torres? He's in communication with 16-year-old girls right now. I had a conversation today with somebody in the community of Dahvie Vanity survivors who told me that they know there's a conversation between him and a 16-year-old girl right now, and she is supposed to go visit him in Florida as soon as she's allowed to travel, given the pandemic and the COVID-19 crisis. What do you say to that young woman tonight?
I think that she should definitely reconsider, because the trauma and the things that, you know, he causes and inflicts on other people, it's very real. It's a very real thing. And I really advise not going forward with that.
Nicole, you had the benefit of being 10 or 11 years older than Katie when you had your contact with Dahvie Vanity.
mm-hmm.
Knowing what you know about Katie's story, knowing what you know about your dealings with him, is he a predator?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't think predators consciously know that they're predators. I have deep-rooted issues that they've never dealt with. And those deep-rooted issues out and are expressed in these behaviors that sometimes they aren't even present when they're in these parts of their personalities. I got to experience a lot of different sides of me. I got to experience the fun side of Dahvie, the musician, the serious musician side of Dahvie, which there is that there a little bit. I got to experience the vulnerable, weak side of him, the hurt little boy. And then I got to experience the path of the sociopath that I think he just dissociates and it's like he's not present, like a lot of sociopathic people are. So I would say that he's a predator, but he's not even conscious about it himself. I think that if you look, the thing that I felt was odd when I was invited to, after working in that one original recording studio, I was then invited to work further on their album and fly to Orlando and record with them. And when I did, I stayed at that very same apartment. And when I walked in, half of me thought that it was very cool that he had all of this fan artwork all over the walls. Did you remember seeing that, Katie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I saw that, yeah.
Another part of me, deep down, being older, felt like something about it was off. Because what Blood on the Dance their money off of wasn't really the music. Yes, it was music, but let's face it, so many streaming platforms that live performance is how you make money and selling dice. And it was really all about the merchandise. And the merchandise was all designed and completely geared towards very young minds, with their logo being this icky character, which is like almost like a Pac-Man ghost type little character. And he would get kids sending fan mail from every over the world that were just literally, 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds obsessed with band because they see these cartoon images, these cartoon characters. It reels them in, tracks those preteens. I mean, these people aren't even teenagers yet, a lot of them. And a lot of it is the parents' fault because of brainwashed parents out there that would go to the shows. And he was so manipulated that not only was he manipulating the young minds, he was also really good at manipulating these like single moms that would come to all the shows. You know what I'm talking about, Katie? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he just was really good all around at what he did, and was really a predator in his own.
Right, and you're familiar with the Jesse Slaughter story, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Damien was on last week, and she was talking about the whole merch angle and how he would bring these young women in there to sell the merch. It almost seems like this entire enterprise was geared around exploiting women who were 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, up until 18. I mean, it seems like the whole thing was focused on exploiting those girls, young women, as well as their parents in some cases.
Yep. And I think in his mind, he didn't think he was doing anything wrong. And I bet you he still doesn't, because the screw that's loose in his head doesn't see it. And so that scares me. And that's why I firmly believe that he needs to be in jail. I mean, if he has enough people that have allegations against him, he shouldn't be, or he should at the very least not be allowed to be performing at venues, be around these groups and having this influence on the youth, in my opinion.
How do you think he's gotten away with this for so long? We know that he was investigated in Colorado after an incident involving allegations of statutory rape. We know he was investigated in Pinellas County, Florida, under similar circumstances. If you read between the lines, you see that in both cases, the victim ultimately did not cooperate. He himself alluded to potential financial payoffs to buy their silence. Why do you think it's been so hard for law enforcement to actually come up with a case against him?
Society is learning right now, as we sit here and speak, that pedophilia is a really, really, really big industry and big problem. So in those government agencies, who knows who good guys are, who the bad guys are. And it seems that pedophilia has really been something that has really fallen under the cracks a lot. And so maybe that could have something to do with it. You know, Hollywood has tried to normalize a lot of things and subliminal messages with this type of behavior in film and TV. And they've been trying to groom the public into accepting that. You look at how they tried to add the LGBTQ and, you know, adding children into drag and all that. And I think that all kind of falls under that umbrella. So maybe that's part of why he's been able to slap for so long. But I think times are changing, and I think people are waking up. And I think this conversation we're all having is part of that changing tide. So let's just keep at it, and maybe we can be part of a group that starts something to actually get him prosecuted.
Katie, why do you think he's been able to get away with this for so long?
In my opinion, I think it's because he knows what he's doing. He's aware of the things that he does. I think that he has this ability, and he knows that he has this like charisma. He has this ability to look really young, and like it's like almost like his personality at times can feel like really like juvenile, really young, and like he really like emphasizes, I think, upon that, and that's why he's like able to, I guess, pull people in.
Katie, what would you say today to Katie Caine 10, 11 years ago when you were with Dahvie Vanity?
I would tell her that, you know, it's not your fault. You know, what was done to you isn't your fault. And that it's okay to feel how you feel.
And why was it so?
Not to go?
Why was it so important for you to? Yeah, that's a good question, Nicole. Would you tell her not to go to visit Dahvie?
Oh, absolutely.
And why did you think it was so important to speak publicly about this for the first time tonight? What do you hope this achieves? I
hope that, you know, other girls can hear this and know like that they're not alone, that other people I'm sorry.
It's okay. Avoid the pain that you felt, that you experienced.
Yeah.
Nicole, if Dahvie is watching tonight, if Jesus Torres is watching tonight, what do you say to him?
I would say that he should really stop and take a moment and really try to remember all these things and ask himself, what pain is it that happened in his life that he never dealt with, that is inside him, that has created this person that he has become, that has negatively impacted lives detrimentally, more so than probably being positive. He's all about positivity, or so he says, and he needs to wake up and realize that he's actually created a lot of strife in people's lives, mine included. You know, I would say that working with him probably ruined my chance at having a music career a long time ago. And, you know, that's a whole different subject, but yeah.
Katie, what would you say to Jesus Torres, Dahvie Vanity tonight, if he's listening?
If he's listening?
Right now.
I don't have anything to say to him. I don't no time of day for him. His energy, anything about it, you know, he's basically F you. That's the nice way of putting it.
And what do you think should happen to him, Katie?
I think that he should pay for the actions of what he's done to all the women involved in, this situation. I think he needs to pay for the things that he's done. He needs to be held accountable.
Do you still feel scars today from what he did to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's difficult having to face something that, you put at the back of your mind for so long, and then it's like being put in the situation and reliving, and it's difficult, to say the least.
All right. Final thoughts, Katie. Is there anything you want people to know?
I want people to know, and I want, people to know that it's okay to talk, and it's okay to speak out, and, don't be afraid. If something has happened to you, please speak, because that's the best chance that you have in talking and reaching out. It's the best chance that you have in, achieving something to be done about the situation.
Katie, thank you so much for having the courage to speak out. Nicole, any last thoughts for Katie tonight?
It's good to see you, and I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. But I hope that just being able to talk about it brings you some kind of closure. And I'm sure you could see just during this talk, we had people popping up at the bottom showing their support and their love for you. So just close this chapter and get ready to move on to bigger and better things. And thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
And
Nicole,
I love you.
Nicole Nogrady, thank you very much for being with us tonight. I appreciate it. And Katie, Caine, thank you for the courage to come forward and to speak out. I promise you both that we will continue this investigation. We will stay on top of this and see it through until we have justice for you and the many other survivors here. In the case of Jesus Torres, Dahvie Vanity of Blood on the Dance Floor. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. We'll be in touch. Take care. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And thank you for joining us tonight on another edition of Have a Seat with Chris Hansen. We will continue this investigation, and we will see you next week when you have a seat with me. One other note, from what I was talking about earlier in the show about all this noise about whether there was going to be a debate or an interview, I think it's important to tell you guys that I know and I get that I'm not, the typical streamer, the typical YouTube content creator. And I get that. I'm a reporter, and I go on YouTube because I have things I think that are important. And if you don't think they're important, that's fine. But I think there's a lot to do here, whether it's on these topics or what we did last night, taking a look at a number of different angles on the pandemic, COVID-19. So I'm going to continue to do it. But, I look at it a little bit differently than some streamers. And I respect the way you look at it. And I just want you to respect the way I look at it. So you have a good night. Please practice all the social distancing that everybody's been talking about. It's important. Every nurse, every doctor I talk to says that people still in some respects don't get it. Stay home if you can. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next week. Take care. I'll be watching.